Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust.
Dear Stardust, 2040. While waiting for my morning coffee, I often strike up a conversation with the local barista. Our discussions span many topics, but AFL remains our favourite. The barista knows the game far better than I do. He knows more about the players, teams, and the significant issues facing the sport. On the other hand, I'm passionate about my club. I diligently scan articles, clips, and updates related specifically to my team. While the barista watches as many games as he can, I'm primarily interested in watching my team. He loves the game. I love my team, my tribe. Just as I reflect on the implications of tribalism in sport, I find myself contemplating similar questions about education. Do I love my educational tribe more than education itself? How does tribalism influence my perceptions and contribution to education? And how might we leverage tribalistic passions to unite us all in pursuit of an educational transformation which raises up individuals, nations, and our world? Stardust, I see immense potential for education in the 21st century. Yet to seize these opportunities demands loosening our grasp on some tribalistic values, beliefs, and attitudes we've gripped so tightly for so long. Education is littered with tribes, classes, teachers, leaders, sectors, even schools of academic thought. More than this, each of us belongs to multiple tribes. The students we teach, the communities we lead, the authorities we represent, and the research we conduct. Tribes are neither inherently good nor bad, but we must recognise the powerful influence our personal tribes hold over each of us. There are genuine tribal benefits. The tribes we inhabit shape our identities, providing meaning, purpose, and something valuable to stand for. We know our team's colours, celebratory songs, and war cries. Tribalism can be a powerful force to ignite passion, inspire action, and solidify commitment. Indeed, the unifying aspects of tribalism can bring us together, for surely we all must stand for something. But at what cost do we lay claim? My tribes? Your tribes? Or our tribes? Problems arise when tribes come into conflict. Us versus them. Winner-takes-all scenarios. Suddenly, boundaries emerge, their energy directed towards defeating other tribes and defending our own. Thinking narrows, limiting our focus inward on justifying why our tribe is right and others are wrong. Fault lines widen, making common ground increasingly elusive. In this environment, ideas, actions, and the potential for change is judged by tribalistic allegiance rather than by the validity of reasoning underpinning them. When other tribes propose alternative approaches, we instinctively reject them, fearing such acceptance jeopardises our tribal loyalty. In these moments, we love our team more than the game. Stardust, I write to you knowing our actions and decisions have shaped your time. I must tell you, education in my time is replete with uncertainty. Global megatrends such as climate change, digitalisation, globalism, escalating health imperatives, and knowledge economies are rapidly eroding traditional social systems. These societal shifts have created what is described as a global urgency for learning, challenging the very nature and purpose of education. I call this the learning challenge of our time. The tension between the tribes of old and new learning playing out in classrooms. I see great opportunities alongside deep concern that our youth, our future, are caught in this conflict. Let me explain. Old learning emphasises fluency, accuracy, and automation of knowledge and skill. Traditionally, students' old learning abilities are assessed and compared using conventional methods that quantify learning through scores and grades. Old learning is deeply entrenched within educational systems that rely heavily on high-stakes testing to rank students, teachers, schools, and even entire education systems globally. Old learning is the basis of the proverbial league table, the points used to determine my tribe's standing among others. Old learning may keep score, but it is not the entirety of learning. To be clear, old learning remains important, enabling students to efficiently and effectively respond to familiar challenges. Yet, the value of these routine cognitive skills, which are the easiest to teach and test, is diminishing given the increasing speed and ease of digitalisation, automation, and the outsourcing of such skills in my time. In some respects, we humans will never outperform machines. Yet, equally so, there are others which we are superior and unmatched. The uncertainty and instability we face now demands new learning. In contrast, new learning relates to 21st century skills or competencies, enabling students to break free from formulaic processes and respond creatively and successfully to unfamiliar and complex challenges. The scope of new learning is broad, placing a premium on analytical and creative thinking, resilience, motivation, self-awareness, curiosity, and self-regulation, due to the economic, social, and intrinsic value. We recognise the need for change, yet determining how to change, what new learning to pursue, how to teach, assess, report, and compare it equitably across systems remains challenging. I'm optimistic and excited about the progress possible here, but I worry our fixation on counting old learning distracts us from instilling in today's and tomorrow's youth what genuinely matters in learning for human prosperity in the 21st century and beyond. Tribalistic tendencies risk fortifying false divisions between old and new learning, preventing us from fostering an authentic love of learning. Stardust, I don't know precisely how to resolve this challenge, but I believe part of the solution lies in valuing appreciation over critique. This does not mean we must all share the same perspectives. Diversity of views within education can enrich and advance society. Our differences should be embraced and explored, not merely criticised or defended. Alternative perspectives should be viewed as opportunities for collective growth. Appreciation requires individuals to clearly and honestly articulate the strengths, weaknesses, and limitations of their own views, coupled with the responsibility to deeply understand alternative perspectives. Changing one's mind in response to new information is neither contradictory nor weak, but a profound indication of learning and growth. In this ideal educational tribe, it's not about who is right, but what is best for our students, communities, and society at large. Stardust, I write to you hoping educators in your time have embraced the courage to transcend tribal boundaries, uniting around the core purpose of education, igniting a genuine, lifelong love of learning in every student. May your educational landscape be marked by openness, appreciation, and unity, not bound by competing tribes, driven by a shared, unwavering commitment to learning itself. Above all, remember education is always about nurturing potential, transcending limitations, and boldly preparing generations to flourish in worlds we cannot yet imagine. Stardust, I hope to meet and celebrate with you in your time, under the banner of one educational tribe. From your friend, Adam Kuss.
Hello, Adam.
How are you, mate?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've loved it. And I'm going to try to start with a song.
I come from a place very far away, Footscray. I moved there to escape a place of great poverty and violence, Collingwood. I like Melbourne, but feel that I am judged by my color, the color of my scarf. I went with red and black, but it is the same here as in my homeland. No one likes the bombers.
So I feel like I'm judged by my colour, the colour of my scarf. And that's what really reminded me, as I was listening to your letter, I was thinking about this idea that as a tribe, we're so often judged by the superficial elements of it rather than the depth of it. And that's sort of a theme that to me came through your letter, is this sense of what actually is defining of a tribe, and are we allowing it to be defined by depth and connection, or are we sort of allowing it to be defined by shallow elements? So those are some of the things that sort of came up for me. So what is tribalism to you?
I think I've been shaped by my experiences in that space. And if I sort of rewind, I was someone who grew up, I suppose, in Catholic education. So I went to a Catholic primary school, a Catholic high school. And then I actually taught at the high school that I went to for a while. And then I went to England and I worked in the public system in England. And then I came back to Australia and I worked in the government system in Queensland. And now I work in the private system. And so I'm very proud that I've worked in 3/4 different sectors of education. And I suppose when I was thinking about that piece, I was thinking about the assumptions, the poor assumptions that I had made about different, sectors or tribes in education. Like when I was at school, I was like, yeah, we want to go out and beat the private school team, or those state schoolers, we can, we're better than them, these sorts of things. And it's just wrong. So I'm really proud that I have gone into these different areas of education and sort of had my assumptions challenged, and it's changed me. And I think that I still hear some of those tribalistic views where people on the outside sort of looking in and just making a lot of assumptions about other schools, other sectors. So that's sort of, that real shaping. It really shapes your understanding for better and worse, I suppose. So it's good to go and immerse yourself in a different tribe.
And one of the things that sort of comes through, you speak of being in a tribe and tribalism as being neither good or bad. And it sort of has this, but not an indifference to you. Like it sort of seems to swing between good and bad rather than being not good or bad. Is that a difference that you kind of can speak to? Yes,
because I grew up and I just wanted to be a teacher at the school that I went to. I loved it. Like it was a big part, was a big part of my identity. in the sense that I loved my school. I had good mates. Like it wasn't always smooth sailing, but it formed who I am today. And there were some brilliant things that came with it, but there was some limiting. For example, when I first came into teaching, and when I worked at the school that I went to, I worked with a lot of teachers that taught me. So I had a whole load of assumptions about them, and they had a whole load of assumptions about me. And I was seen as the I graduated as a PE maths teacher. So I was the PE teacher. Like I was pretty good at sport at school. So, you're a PE teacher. So they didn't see me in a different light. So when I went to a different school, I was the maths teacher. They didn't see me as the PE teacher, which was fine. And then I ended up teaching history, philosophy. So, it's this sort of shift in my identity. And that, as I said, there's so many positive things came from that, but also limiting things where whether myself or others thought that I could or couldn't do particular things. So I don't think it's good or bad. I think it's just trying to understand the influence of culture on yourself and how others see the world.
And do you think your change in sort of cultural identity feeds into that view of a tribe, because you see it as quite transitional, probably quite transient, dynamic, where others would see, that connection to a tribe as being a survival piece. And in fact, if you lose connection with your tribe, you actually lose identity. But you're almost talking about if you move tribes, you gain identity.
Yeah, there is absolutely that connection piece, that safety in the tribe, and it can be easier, to stay with that tribe. I suppose part of me, I don't like sort of saying that I'm a subject teacher or a school leader, and people sort of laugh at me a little bit when I say this, but I like to say I'm an educator, and I mean that because I am in this tribe of educators, like we all are, and I've taught lots of different subjects. I've worked in lots of different schools because I love education. It's not the particular subject that I love, or my identity isn't attached to that thing or that role. So you can, stay in one school and your tribe, and things can be easier there. You just, it's expected of you, and people know you, which is a great thing. But I think it's a personal thing in people. I'm always curious what's outside the cave, like to use Plato's allegory, like every school is a particular cave, and that's great, but try to get out and experience other things. And that is scary because you're not quite sure what's out there. And when because I walked away from being a deputy to do my PhD study, and it was scary. I remember at the time a friend of mine, I said, geez, I don't know what it's going to look like the next little period. He said, like, it's jumping. You're taking a leap, but you have to have faith the trapeze will appear. And you're just going through this. So I had to not reform my identity. When you go to a new place, you don't have that same identity. People are like, who's this person? And you do have to get, I suppose they talk about street cred, like, oh, what's your role? What do you do here? But it is uncomfortable, but it is also a chance to grow and to come in with fresh eyes to a place, and hopefully an open heart of learning to see how you can grow.
And when you leave your cave, and let's say you go to a dinner party or an event, your daughter's birthday party of some sort, and someone says, "Oh, g'day, Adam. What do you do?" What do you say?
I wish my wife was here for this, Michael, because she hates that question. She's like, I could never say what Adam does. I've got no idea.
That's exactly what my wife says. She's like, I don't know how to answer this. And people say, what's your PhD in? And I just say, I don't know, it's just something.
Yeah.
And like they love it and they care about it, but they can't put their finger on it.
You probably have a similar conversation in the morning. My wife will often say, and where are you today? Like,
that checks out. Yep.
What do I say? Well, I suppose it's an answer that's got easier for me over the last sort of 5-6 years, because there's been a little bit more clarity, I suppose, in what I do. So now I say that I work with teachers and leaders to get better in their role. Like, that's the broad sort of brush. And I love it. And I think it's different to teaching students, obviously. Like, I still have a class that I teach and things, but it's still very much an educational piece. And you're working with adults to hopefully so they can grow. And that's a wonderful, it's such a privilege, I think, to work in that space. And because those adults go on and work with hundreds/thousands of kids, and they've got real challenges, and you're trying to support them through those challenges and set up, supportive networks for them. So I'm really lucky to be in that space, and I learn so much. Like, I still enjoy the classroom, and thinking about those bigger issues and trying to bring down what that means for students and their learning. But for me, I need to get out of that space at times to think about those bigger issues and try to make it real. It's like this grey zone between staying in the classroom, staying in the school, and then going between schools and classrooms to try and help. So,
And as I read your letter, as I hear your letter, I can't quite put my finger on whether you know exactly where you belong or feel a sense of place in these different spots. So I'd love for you to be able to kind of clarify that for me. It's not to say that it looks like you don't. I just can't quite work out exactly where you see yourself placed.
yeah, that's a brilliant question, because I'm not quite sure, but I'm getting clearer. I think the role that I'd probably like to be doing is this bigger piece of bringing together what we mean by learning and education. Like, there's no particular job or descriptor. Like, you can look through Seek and there won't be anything with that job title. So it's a case of finding a job. Like, I really enjoy my job at the moment, which is working with leaders in leadership development, but it's with that eye to understanding the bigger picture and trying to contribute to that bigger aim in education. I think that's very hard, because we create so many micro tribes in education that often we've got to put, our students, our school, our sector before the bigger piece of education. And there's no one, well, to say no one's a big call, but there's not many people that are working on the bigger piece of education, because we're so sort of splintered. And look, there's good reason for that. It's a very big bubble, education, so it makes it easier to sort of manage. But you constantly, when you're in one school or one classroom, you've got that tension all the time. You may want to contribute to the bigger piece, but you just are hamstrung to a point. So and it's such a great question. I'm not sure would be the answer there, but I'm very curious to. I'm more at ease with it now. I think for a while it caused a bit of tension for me. I was struggling. I thought university was the answer, but I don't think it is anymore. But yeah, I don't know, but I'm okay with that now. It caused quite a bit of angst a couple of years ago. Probably financially as well, as you know, Michael, when you're trying to figure these things out.
There's an element of this conversation where I feel like I could be speaking into a mirror rather than a screen at this point. So you have to excuse a couple of moments of just sort of stepping back and going, oh gosh, is that me that I'm talking to?
Yeah.
Because it's true. I mean, I think just as you were talking about the job of the future, like your future role, I thought, in a weird way, you and I are competing for a job that doesn't exist, in the sense that, like, we've got to write it, work out what it is. And when you said in the bigger, no one's really tackling that big piece. And I was actually speaking to my supervisor yesterday, and she said, oh, we've got to find someone to do your examination. But there's just so few people doing that big picture piece who are going to be able to be the examiner for your topic. And it's kind of thought, yeah, that that true philosophy of education has dipped back a little bit. And we've got, we need everyone doing research in all different ways. But that bigger piece is less common now, I think.
Mm. Mm. Which I think is so sad about, really, it's related. Like, universities have their schools of thought on things, and you're trying to pick examiners, and you're trying to pick someone in your tribe who knows, who gets your methodology and the way you're seeing the world, and basically to get your tick. If you want to boil it down to that, it's someone who can at least understand the way you're seeing the world. And my naivety of stepping into, no, ignorance, I'd say, of stepping into the world of academia was, the classic split between qualitative and quantitative research. And I just didn't realize how political that was. Like, it's just, so, yeah, I get the points. Well, I try to get the points of both sides. And look, I probably lean more qualitative. I'm doing qualitative study. Doesn't mean I disregard quantitative methodology and all those sorts of things. But some people do. And I think that's so limiting. Like, one of the things that I get really curious about is they talk about like a lack of literacy, like affects people in their roles, or a lack of numeracy. I think in terms of school leadership, a lack of research skills has a big effect on leadership, because you could justify anything, pretty much anything you want to do. Oh, the research says this, look at this, and it's like one paper with 20 kids, whatever. You think, well, what about this? And it becomes just such a minefield for people. So if to take that step up to look at the bigger picture is a skill, I think. So I've digressed there, mate. Sorry.
No, that's good, because this idea of research, I think, and you and I both went from maths to philosophy in our teaching, which I didn't realize, which is lovely, and indeed use Plato's allegory of the cave in my philosophy classes as well. This idea that research informed means that you read research and then apply it to a classroom, and that's just, to me, it misses that really key part of the epistemological and ontological piece. That the ontological side of it, which I was naive and ignorant of leading into study, but being able to look and say, actually, one of the reasons why my maths teacher in class 9G is behaving the way they are, I'm not saying it's good behavior or bad behavior, but the choices they're making is due to a view of reality.
Mm.
And I'm trying to change their teaching practice in a small way. I'm asking them to make a shift from here to here, or maybe not even a teaching practice. Let's say I'm trying to support them to move to a new learning management system. If their ontological view is of a certain type, that change is so irrelevant to them. And we say things like, oh, that they don't handle change well. It's like, no, I'm asking them to change their view of reality. And that is a preposterous thing to do to someone. And we think, and as you speak of tribes, if these tribes are built on the color of a scarf, we can change that stuff. If the tribes are built on a view of reality, you have no chance of changing that with 3 staff meetings. There's no question there. But what do you think of that?
No. I love it, because I thought I kind of do. No, I do explore this in my thesis, in the sense that I'm fascinated to know the relationship between a leader's view of learning, what they think learning is. It about academic results? Is it old learning, whatever, or is it new learning, and how that influences their leadership practice. And I think it's ontologically, I think it's a cultural phenomenon. So, to say we're going to introduce like general capabilities or whatever it is, and this like policy stuff, you go, yep, that's it, like the job's up. Well, no, there's so much more that needs to happen to change this person's reality. Like it's a really significant thing. Like, if you've grown up in a system, you went to school, and most teachers did pretty well at school. So they would have got pretty good results. They got into uni. Again, big sort of stereotype, but most teachers probably did well with direct instruction, and that becomes part of what you think teaching learning is about. So to introduce new learning like constructivist pedagogies, all those sorts of things, it's a big shake-up for assessment, for reporting, for everything. So it's such a challenge that we face, and that's not to say that assessment's bad or old learning's bad or directed. That's like I get very agitated by that sort of dialogue in education. It's not helping us to say, this is the effect size of this versus that. Like I think the average teacher knows, and I mean that not to downplay a teacher. I just mean like the majority of teachers know that you need a whole raft of pedagogical approaches. To say that it's this one is always better and all that sort of stuff is just a crazy argument. And sometimes that's what comes out. Some just constantly sort of preference one approach over other, and it becomes really dogmatic. And then you're so narrowed about your view of learning and teaching. And I wrote about in that piece, it's defense. You're trying to defend it as opposed to, maybe the other team has some ideas here that I could use. And it's open. There should be a degree of openness there. And I think I spoke in there about I think we underplay that notion of appreciation, because it's not just identifying something in another person's argument. It's actually appreciating where they're coming from. And that's a much deeper level of understanding. You actually have to understand that perspective to appreciate it, as opposed to give it lip service. So
I'd love for us to have a little chat about about tension, because you use the word tension, and in some cases people use things like tensions as a lowercase t of just I'm talking about things being in conflict of some kind. Then there's that sort of capital T tension, which has tension types and analytical frameworks as well. So that's where I'd love to go in 2 steps time. But in the first one, I'd just love to know about 2040, which is when you wrote to.
Yeah, 2040. I think I think education is just going to be vastly different in 2040. I'll just use the one example of AI, like Chat GPT 5 came out last week or the week before, whatever it is, and it's a remarkable piece of technology. So I was playing with it with a group of teachers the other day, and even like for my thesis writing it, and we're putting codes in there saying, prompts, do not write the assignment for the student, like big capital, don't do this, And after a couple, it eventually says, would you like me to write that piece for you? It's like, oh yeah, go on, okay. Like, and we're trying to put ourselves in a teenage, okay, and respond in that sort of way. And it does it, and then it spits out this, pretty nice piece, and then you're like, I did tell you not to do that. Like,
yep.
And it's
3 messages ago.
Yeah, this is just an example. You don't need to use it, and they're like, well, the genie's out of the bottle. And even like just yesterday, I was using it, and it says, would you like me to write this section of your thesis for you? You could input it, just copy and paste in. And I was like, I've not uploaded any of my thesis work to you, obviously questions and all that sort of stuff. So it picks up a thread. But that's so alluring. It's so alluring when it's about the assignment. So I don't know how we hold that back. But when it's just about the assignment, I don't know how teachers are meant to be the safeguard or to check authenticity and authorship. I just can't see how our systems can do that. So, okay, maybe we progress on this path for 2, 3, 4, 5 more years. But I think in 2040, like we're talking 15 years away, I'm going, surely we're not doing this for another 15 years, because AI, the worst AI you used is the one you just used. And it's just a tsunami. So I think we've got to find, like, the burnout rate on teachers. Like, this is an enormous workload on individual teachers. And it doesn't matter how good the policy is written.
I think the practicality of it, that kids are going to use it. So I'm not having a shot at kids for that. I get it if you're under pressure to do that particular thing. So it's just got to change. So for people's health, work-life balance, the good of the profession, and ultimately, obviously, ultimately the good of humanity and future generations coming through. Because what's the point of being a human if AI can do it?
So originally I was going to ask you, well, I was sort of asking why as soon as 2040, but now I'm going to rephrase that. Why did you go as far away as 2040 when, from what you're telling me, 2026 is going to be unrecognizable? Maybe not 2026, but like 2030 is going to be unrecognizable from what you've just said. So why project that extra 10?
I thought about 5 years. I thought about 2030. But then I thought, oh, the model of education's been the same for about 160 years. So maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic. So I thought 2040 is a safer option. So I was, the banker option, if I could be so bold. But I was also thinking in the sense of how important the next 5 years are, because I think that is like what we do today will absolutely impact 2040. And you could say that for anything, but I think this is such an amazing period to be an educator. It's so dynamic, and that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. Don't get me wrong, like that, and sometimes I worry, but I also see the chance to actually transform education, and that really inspires me. It fills me with optimism and hope for the future. But I think that this 5-year window is such a potentially electrifying time for us, and I think we've got to come together on some things, like to maybe remove some of those tribalistic boundaries that we've put up.
So we've got to work our way through some tensions.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to what extent have you engaged with like tension types?
I haven't, but happy to have a crash course.
So what I'll do is there's 4 that I want to speak about.
Yep.
And so I'll kind of explain the characteristics of each one. And then the idea that I've got is that we'll kind of talk through this tension that you, like the old new that you're talking about, through the lens of this tension type.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that works.
Cool.
Sound okay?
Let's give it a go. Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about tension. And there's lots of different types of tension. And so often we kind of just see tension as being 2 things disagreeing. But we also use language like, oh, this is a dilemma. This is a paradox. This is and these are tension types for us to look at. And so if old learning and new learning is in tension, and that tension is a dilemma, I'd love to know what your thoughts are of this. And a dilemma speaks about opposing tribes, each providing a logical solution. The advantages and disadvantages of both sides are evaluated, but the long-term solution doesn't involve a consensus position. So it's effectively that in this tension type, we really try to understand everything, we evaluate it all, but we go a direction.
And we don't need both tribes on side.
No.
Is that okay? All right.
There's a consensus position though. There's an agreement that we're going to do something, but that doesn't mean everyone's happy with it.
Okay. Specifically in this space, in terms of old learning, I'll introduce a sort of new piece of language in that. There's this thing called routine expertise. So routine expertise is a really good thing for familiar situations. You do things effectively and efficiently. Like in the morning when I get up, we've all got a routine. Like I don't sit around there thinking, oh, what am I going to do next? And it can be great for sight reading and simple maths problems and all that sort of stuff. Tick, absolutely. Routine expertise is really, it's much easier to capture on a traditional exam. So pen and paper, And that's a good thing. And we use a lot of those measurements to get kids into uni and their ATAR scores and whatever. So that's part of this tension. And people that hold on to that, they'll often say, oh, we don't have another way to measure consistently across education, for getting kids into uni and whatnot, pathways. So that is a really good point. It's like you talk about new learning. So new learning is adaptive expertise. So it's doing something. So it's unfamiliar situations, being able to respond. You could talk about sort of epistemic thinking within disciplines. It's more dynamic and fluid. Like you're doing more than what you've been given from the teacher. So, your sight reading and all those sorts of things. Well, now I need you to construct a paragraph with a range of ideas and all that sort of stuff. So AI is starting to do some of those things. So, and there's obviously the new metric stuff and 21st century capabilities and all that. And people say, well, how do we capture that with validity? And we don't have an answer in that space yet, but I think most educators see the need to move in this new learning, but we just haven't got mechanisms in place set up to the point that some systems, such as the UK, and I haven't checked for a little while, but they were just moving back to pen and paper exams. So and that is a response, and that does work, and that will give you consistency and security, but it's a bit of a Band-Aid for the long term. So I think that answers that tension. I think there is agreement to move that way, but how?
Yeah.
We don't know how to get there.
Yeah. And if we do see it as a dilemma, which I think in a lot of cases we are, in the sense that we've got these two positions, we have evaluated the advantages and disadvantages of going one of those two ways, but plenty are saying, look, because we don't have mechanisms for validity, we're going to go with option A, irrespective of whether it's the right move, wrong move, whatever that ends up being. The advantages of that move at this point, things like validity, because school does serve as a pathway to tertiary models. Because of that, we're actually going to stick with this method. It also has some really great advantages for some of our most disadvantaged learners, in supporting them to catch up in areas of education that are still valued across the society. So in some ways, I think the dilemma between old and new is actually going to come out with old on top, because of, I think the advantages in a lot of ways outweigh the disadvantages.
Yep.
But that's if it's a dilemma. And so if we see it though as a tension, a duality, and a duality is defined as being opposite tribes coexisting within a system, and that understanding one tribe helps the other tribe understand themselves better, and that there is a long-term agreement where both tribes can coexist. That's a duality tension type. And so what's it going to be like if old and new learning exist in duality?
That's probably the space that I sit at the moment, because I think there are great benefits. Like kids need to be able to sight read, and they need to be able to do their simple arithmetic, things like that. So that's not they're not bad skills to have. It's trying to find a way that we can not only capture old learning, but ways to celebrate new learning. And as that previous tension, we're probably a little bit more skewed to constantly valuing the old over the new all the time, and finding a way for both to exist. Now, to say they both exist on level pegging might be a stretch too far, but at the moment, I just don't think there's enough conversation about that new learning. So what would that conversation of new learning look like if they were coexisting? I think you'd have students talking about 21st century skills, but I should wind back, Michael. Part of the issue with new learning is that it is so big and broad. It's sort of like everyone could be a winner. And having some sort of clarity around this is what we mean in that space. And I don't really talk about that. And we could look in Australia, the general capabilities or whatnot. But if we just look at a car and the general capabilities, existing together would be something like schools reporting on them. Existing together would be kids actually seeing this as a worthy learning aim. It would be talking to teachers about, how are you developing, critical, creative thinking with your students, civics, all those sorts of things. It would be thinking through pedagogically what that looks like in frameworks. Like it's great to have, old learning effect size, all this sort of stuff, as I'm not against it. But if you change the aims of what you're trying to develop in students, that calls into question all those measures of teaching. So it's just like that coexistence is where I'd love us to get to. But there's a lot of things absent at the moment in that dialogue.
Do you think we're having conversations that are attempting to get to coexistence, or do you think we're still in that dilemma piece where we're evaluating advantages and disadvantages and trying to find a tribe to go with?
No, I think we absolutely are. Like I could, in different pockets, I just look at what South Australia is trying to do. I think that work is so inspiring that they're trying to get both to coexist. They're trying to expand the conversation. Not every region in Australia is looking at that. I think there's a lot of focus on how that's tracking in South Australia, and it's going to be hard. Like it is going to, and it's so ambitious, but that's why it's inspiring. There is work across, the globe in terms of having, students prepare a portfolio for entry into university and things like that. You only need to sort of look at job application or job recruitment processes these days. It's not just a CV and a reference check. There's often something more dynamic involved with it. I had a friend of mine go for a surgeon position, and I can't show you it though, but he walked in and the provocation was a model, and it was a piece of paper in this really strange structure. And they said, you got 10 minutes to figure out how we did that. And this person has, multiple, university degrees and academically, boom, like they've got it. But this was like, okay, out of the box, how do I do this? And all they gave him was a piece of paper and a pair of scissors. And he had to think on his feet. So I think we're trying to, and that dialogue is there. It's just that the big systems typically in education haven't shifted yet. But there is shift happening.
I'd love to talk about your surgeon, because
Okay.
if that person was your surgeon, do you care how well they manage that piece of paper and those scissors?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'll tell you. Yeah, I do. I do, because they had to think on their feet, and not everything in a surgery will always go to plan. And they're not a technician; they're an expert. So the end of the interview process, it wasn't that they solved the puzzle; it was how they went about solving that puzzle. And I don't know. I don't know who ended up getting the job or if they solved that particular puzzle or something. But they wanted to see how that person worked under pressure. Like it's all very easy when it's a routine operation, but when it goes off chart, that's when you do want an expert who can be adaptive and responsive. So I do
Yeah.
in that scenario.
And so that's where I think there are some people who would say, no, I don't actually care about that side, and that's fine. But just to kind of kick this a few further steps down the road and say, if something goes wrong and this person is appearing in court, and the person who employed that surgeon said, we're sure we made the best decision because of how well they managed this puzzle that we set forward. It's going to be really interesting one day when that's the kind of conversation that's taking place, because I don't think that would stand up at this moment.
No. And look, I don't think that should be the only thing you're making a decision on. Yeah. So I think it's an on-balance judgment. So you're dealing with a field of experts which pretty much all have the same qualifications. Yeah, and they're all in the top of their field, in the first few. So they're all experts. So how do you get a point of difference? So that was one of the things that they got them to do in this scenario, to see how they took pressure and how they responded. The processes that I think it's about themselves. This is the educator in me. It's about themselves as a learner.
Yeah.
This is a learning challenge you're facing. How do you go about that? Here's your resources. Are you going to skits out, get emotional, frustrated, or are you going to calm yourself, have some sort of process? So look, I would not be comfortable if that was the crux of their decision. I suppose in that respect, I want them to value the old over the new, but I don't want them to disregard the new. It's coming in together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is what the very conversation that we've just had, or the what I was feeding back, or the questions I was asking, are symptomatic of the problem in the conversation at the moment. In that people think old learning is boring, it's in rows, it's repetition, and people think new learning is where we don't care about content, knowledge, skills, those kind of things. All we care about is capabilities. But and the reason why I think it's so important to see this in a duality sense is that in a duality, opposite tribes coexist, yes, but understanding one tribe fully helps you understand yours more fully as well. And I don't think we're trying to do that. I don't think old learning is trying to really deeply understand new learning to help understand themselves better. And I don't think new learning, as a broad brush, I think you would definitely be an exception to this, but generally speaking, the new learning crew aren't looking at old learning and going, how do we understand ourselves better by looking at that?
Oh, look, I agree wholeheartedly. And like, to reflect on that piece that I wrote, like that was my struggle in this space, because I was a school leader very young. So I was 25 and I was head of maths of a really big school, and I had such a strong focus on old learning, getting better NAPLAN scores, all that sort of stuff. And then I always loved philosophy, and I fell into philosophy, and there was this sort of new idea of learning. And I swung from having to justify everything that I did in terms of old learning metrics, but I was using this new pedagogical sort of paradigm. I wouldn't call it new, maybe an innovation, because Socratic method's been around for a while. And the aims that I was pursuing were different to just getting an exam score. And for me, I just found it increasingly frustrating having to justify this, inquiry methodology or inquiry approach to teaching by pointing to metrics of learning. And it didn't matter, for some, it didn't matter the metrics that I pulled up in terms of old learning. It wasn't enough to convince them. They really just wanted the direct instruction sort of. And again, I'm really simplifying this argument here, but it was more a case of me. I then swung the other way to be all about new learning, 21st century skills. But then I got frustrated over there as well, because I went, well, hang on, you do need content. It's not just this. So I've found myself now in the middle, but that's taken me, well, I hope that I've found myself in the middle. That's taken nearly 20 years, and I've jumped tribes multiple times.
So let's look at
hard.
So let's look at the dialectic then, that tension type. So a dialectic is a sustained process, and it's typified by creative tension. It really looks to integrate tribes at opposite ends into a new central tribe. But because we've got that focus on similarities, on drawing like similarities from those tribes to find a middle ground, the long-term viability of that solution probably isn't there, because we're disregarding differences, and we're not, because that's where the real creative tension kind of comes in. So to what extent are we are you aiming for that maybe dialectic view of a new tribe rather than a bringing together of the two tribes into a coexistence?
That's a great question. So just so I'm clear, so the new tribe primarily focuses on the similarities between old and new learning. Is that it?
It would, in the sense that if you were going to draw two tribes together, bringing them together based on their differences, to me, seems really unlikely. But bringing them together based on their similarities feels like a more palatable new tribe.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a sense that it's impossible, but I think the reality of two tribes coming together to form a new tribe, you're probably going to focus on what makes those tribes similar to try to get the harmony rather than to focus on their differences.
Yeah. I'm just thinking how I'd sort of frame that in this space. I suppose I am trying to create a new tribe in that sense, but my worry in creating a new tribe like that, and this is a real thought bubble here, I'm thinking on my feet, I don't know if it would work. And the reason that I say that is there is a deeply held value set about what learning is. And I think bringing those two value sets together is a really hard thing. And because they're not, are they similar? I think they're similar in the sense that I don't know an educator that doesn't want their kids to do well. We're all in it for students. But what we think doing well means in terms of learning, that can be poles apart, and trying to sort of reconcile those two things, I think, would be incredibly difficult. I suppose what I'm trying to aim for, and this is a pure reflection on my experience, is a more nuanced view. Like, it would have to be a tribe that has a more nuanced understanding of those extremes, and it's not disregarding. It's not about disregarding one or the other. It's about saying, well, look, in this particular circumstance, I'm trying to get kids to do this thing. Recall, whatever. But like, if it's old learning or new learning, that's fine. But it's trying to have that epistemic flexibility, if I introduce that sort of term, like that you're comfortable with shifting between those paradigms to achieve different aims. And I think and when we're going to go back on my words here, I think maybe we can achieve that, but it's just really hard to be in that space of flexibility when there's a lot of pressures on you to work in this space, like whatever that space is. So I don't know if it's a great question, Michael. I feel like I've talked around in circles there, mate, but it's really got me thinking what that new tribe would look like.
And one of the reasons that I think it's important to bring that up in this case is because when you're writing to 2040, is there going to be a new tribe in 2040? Or will a tribe win between now and then another tribe will come and be in tension with that?
Look, I really hope it's not about one tribe winning, because I think that just there'll be another battleground being marked out.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be discussion, contestation in the space. I'm not saying that at all. That would be a step. That would be regressive. So I hope that it would be a new tribe in the sense of a bringing together along those lines that I sort of described, that epistemic flexibility. Yeah, I wouldn't want it to be a winner take all sort of thing. But yeah, that would not be good for our society.
And that's where this idea of attentional analysis, whilst it may seem like quite an esoteric kind of an esoteric thing to do, the difference between thinking about this as a duality or thinking about it as a dialectic if we're thinking about it as a duality, we're looking for a way for both tribes to coexist. But if we're thinking about it as a dialectic, we're trying to find ways to recreate a new tribe. And that's fundamentally, to me, a totally different thing as a leader. If I've got old and new in my staff, for example, am I trying to put something together so that these two can coexist? Or am I trying to put together something where one tribe leaves and the other one stays? Or am I actually trying to recreate a third unique tribe in my space? I just don't think that clarity around what we're attempting to do is there in the leadership dialogue that I hear.
No, I don't think it is. And I think you've raised a really good point, because I find this incredibly practical. Like, because you could talk to leaders about a particular mindset, regardless of the issue. If we just step away from learning for a moment, you think, look, I'm the leader here. I'm the authority. I'm gonna set up a new tribe, or my tribe's going to win, or whatever it is. Like, it talks a lot about the mindset of that leader, regardless of the issue of what they're trying to do. Are they trying to bring people together? Are they just trying to kick out the other tribe, so their tribe's just bigger and it's a real domination? So I think that's a really fascinating point. But I don't know, in terms of old and new, if schools are even permitted to be in that space, because I think the settings are such that there is such a weight on old learning that they can't really. They're just doing. They've got two hands tied behind their back, and I wonder if schools were able, like individually, there are teachers in that space, but I wonder collectively if schools were given the autonomy to shift into that space, how they'd respond. That would be fascinating to see.
Yeah, because in 2040, which is where you're projecting to, are we going to have persistent tension between state and federal systems, between individual schools and their systems? Because there's not just tension within individual schools, within fields of thought. These tensions are happening in, as I said, systems, in federated structures that we've got. But then we've also got things like the Sustainable Development Goals, which come through and produce tensions. Because if I'm at a local high school, I have global goals for the expectation of the sustainable growth of, or the sustainability of the world. And then I've also got a kid in front of me who doesn't have lunch. And there's a tension there. And it's really, really hard for leaders to play in those spaces. So in 2040, are we still going to have those tensions at every level? Or is this just, I think you said for the last 160 years it's been like this, so is it going to go away in the next 15?
Look, is it going to? No, I think like there will always be tension. But I suppose I was framing it particularly in terms of that broader debate about learning. And again, you might say, well, Adam, define what you mean by that, like the environmental sustainability outcomes, like that can be about learning as well. Well, that is about learning, I should say. I hope that by 2040, the expectations placed on schools in terms of where they're meant to get kids at in their learning can be somewhat more clearer. Because so many things, as you said, get pushed down onto education, that education's the answer. And I think what's funny, education probably is the answer in many instances, but there's only so much headspace that students, teachers, and leaders have. So their attentional economy is not infinite. So I hope that there could be greater clarity. Like there's all these, I suppose, silent. How can I put it? Are they silent expectations? They're expectations placed on schools that we're supposed to do, but no one's really checking. So they check the exit academic results, and so a lot of energy gets pushed into there. If some of that energy could be transferred into other aspects, again, it's a bit like I think it's Biesta says, if we're not, are we measuring what we value? We value what we're measuring. So it's always going to be messy. But if we could somehow find a way to give schools some clarity and systems some clarity, I think we could be more unifying in that space, and to give schools a little bit more autonomy to pursue these goals. That would be the aim. I can't give the wonder bullet or one educational tribe to solve every issue.
I don't know to what extent you were or are a Simpsons fan, but I'm going to paraphrase Homer Simpson and say education is the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Yeah, there you go.
I think he says beer. I think he says beer, but education.
Does he?
Yeah. Adam Kuss, we started with a letter and then we went to a song, chatted about scarves, and wrapped it up with some tensional analysis. This has been such a special experience. I really appreciate your letter. I love that it's to 2040. I love that it's about, there's a degree of uncertainty about identity in it. And I love that there's a degree of messiness, but also beautiful clarity in the way you write. So I'm so thrilled that you shared it with us. And I just can't wait to see what 2040 has in store, but really probably 2030.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for asking me. I definitely got me thinking, and there's a part of so like personal reflection, like my growth. I hope as an educator, and you have definitely given me some food for thought. I really enjoyed that tensional analysis. So yeah, thank you so much, mate. You're a very good host.